ESPN did a full NFL 2025 preview and had some crazy predictions for the Miami Dolphins. This is Dolphins Today. I am Nick Roloff. We'll start by doing and showing their preview for Miami. They gave the Fins a 34.9% to make the playoffs this year. They gave the Dolphins an 11.7% chance to win the AFC East. They project 8.1 wins for the Fins, despite having an 8-9 record last year, with Tua Tagovailoa only playing in 11 games. Also, Miami has the 11th easiest schedule. I disagree with ESPN to a degree. They won 8 games last year and Tua missed 6. So if Tua played in 14 games last season, they probably win 9 or 10. I feel as if Miami is going to win 10 games this year. My record prediction, the final one I did last weekend, had the Dolphins going 10-7. So I do disagree with ESPN, and I do think Miami makes the playoffs. But I'll hear out ESPN and showcase everything they said on the Dolphins coming up right now. As we get into what ESPN said on the Fins, I do also want to make note. In this article, they had power rankings for each NFL team. They ranked the Dolphins 21st in the National Football League. And I feel as if that is where the consensus is for Miami. Even this Own Chat Sports power rankings video that we did, polling everybody that works here at the company, had Miami finishing 21 or 22nd. I forgot the exact number, but it was either one of those two. So we've seen ESPN rank them at 21st, the NFL, us here at Chat Sports. So I guess that's where the public media thinks of them. Now, personally, I rank them at 17. I don't think they are worse than teams like the Bears, the Falcons, the Steelers, which teams are ranked ahead of Miami consistently in all of these national pundits' power rankings. But either way, that is how I feel. And make sure you are subscribed to the channel. One, because this article was only accessed on ESPN Plus. That costs $120 a year. We talk about it for free. $0. We're also 175 subscribers away from 73K. The goal is to get to 73K before we kick off on Sunday in week 1. Let's get there, secure W by hitting 73K subs. All right, so ESPN labeled the biggest strength, biggest weakness, a fun stat, as well as the bold prediction. We'll start with the biggest strength, which was no surprise. They labeled it as the front seven, a.k.a. this dynamic pass rush Miami is going to have. You start with the interior defensive line. You have the most underrated defensive lineman in football in Zach Sealer, a solid run-stopping D tackle in Benito Jones, and then you invested in the trenches in the draft with Kenneth Grant in the first round, Jordan Phillips in the 5th round, who looks like a stud, by the way, and Zeke Biggers in the 7th. But then you pair this defensive line group with the edge group / outside linebacker group, and now we're talking real business here. Chop Robinson looks for a massive second season. Jalen Phillips is looking to return from an injury, as well as Bradley Chubb, with Matthew Judon, the veteran, being that solid, consistent 4th edge rusher. If you stay healthy, and I know it is an if, but if you can, this is a top 3 pass rush in football without a doubt. The top, I think, 5 in no order are the Dolphins, Giants, Vikings, Texans, and probably Philadelphia Eagles. If the Dolphins stay healthy, they can absolutely be the best out of those 5 teams I just mentioned. I just believe in Chop Robinson's second-year leap. I believe in Phillips and Chubb staying healthy finally. They just have such bad luck. There's no way that luck continues. It can't. I believe it's going to be a dominant year for the Dolphins' defensive line. Now, also not really the biggest surprise in the world, the biggest weakness for the Dolphins. ESPN labeled it as the secondary heading into 2025. So biggest strength, defensive front 7. Biggest weakness, that back 4 or 5. Marcel from ESPN had the report on the Dolphins' weakness, saying Miami knows what it's getting in Minkah Fitzpatrick, but as a completely revamped secondary from a season ago, second-year UDFA Storm Duck figures to start opposite Jack Jones at cornerback, and the group is unproven together. The Dolphins haven't shown much concern for the group this offseason and believe the success of their defense starts up front. And although the initial depth chart for Miami only listed 2 starting corners, I will project Jason Marshall Jr. to be a starter in the nickel. with Storm Duck and Jones starting on the outside. Douglas and Juju Brents will back them up to start the year. Now, I will disagree with Marcel just slightly here. When you factor in the secondary as the biggest weakness, I include, when you consider secondary, safeties. I feel very good about the safety room. Those are solid. Davis, Melifonwu, Fitzpatrick, Campbell, Trader Jr. That's a good group of 5 safeties. So they provide a lot of stability, in my opinion, for this Dolphins secondary. Now, if you were just talking about cornerbacks being the biggest weakness, sure, I can buy into that theory. But secondary as a whole, not so fast, my friend. Shout out Lee Corso. My biggest weakness is the tight end room. Simply put, Darren Waller, who's dealing with a hip injury and is probably going to play in week 1, but I don't expect a lot, is leading a Julian Hill and Tanner Conner room. That is ugly. It's the worst tight end room in the National Football League. And you might say the same thing about the cornerback room. That's fine. But I feel as if you compare how good the tight end room is for itself and compared to the cornerback room to itself, I would rather have the cornerback room. Like, the tight end room is really, really bad. I know it's not as important as a position, but the point remains that I think the biggest weakness on this football team is its tight end room, not its secondary as a whole, because I have a lot of good feelings about that safety room. More coming up here in a second, but this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. I make decisions every single day, so do you. And, well, on Prize Picks, those decisions could get you paid if you are right. And this season on Prize Picks, it is good to be right. You can cash in by taking more or less on player projections like Saquon Barkley, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. Pick more or less on 2 to 6 players, and you can really start to cash in. They put their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Prize Picks offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. I make entries every week in football, whether it's college or professional. I've got an entry in for the opening game. More than CeeDee Lamb receptions. Take advantage of the Dak Prescott discounted stat projection of a half a passing yard. I also have Devontae Smith to have a touchdown and Javonte Williams to run it less than 10 times. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Now, in no surprise here, ESPN had a really interesting stat that I wanted to share, but it's basically bringing into a larger conversation that Tua Tagovailoa is the most vital part of the Dolphins having success, not only this year, but historically since he's been drafted by the Dolphins in the top 5. I've been saying this for a while, but this ESPN research statistic really just hammers home my point. Miami's success hinges on Tua's health. The Dolphins, over the past 3 seasons, are 25-17 when Tua starts, a winning football team that makes the playoffs 2 out of 3 years. Without Tua, they are 3-8, a team that would likely be picking in the top 5 of the NFL draft if that is prorated out to a full NFL season. I've been telling y'all this all offseason long. I've made videos about how Tua is more important than you think, how Tua is better than you think. If he plays 17 games, the Dolphins will win at least 9. He needs to play 17 to not only prove that he can do it for a second time in his career, but provide confidence from the fans as well as in the front office and coaching staff that he is the QB1 of the future. And like I said, if he plays 17, they'll win 9. He's, as a starter in his career, 38-24. He's simply a winning football player. When he plays, he wins. So Tua, play 17 games, I'm begging you, and I think we go 10-7. Bold prediction coming up in a second, but predict the Dolphins' 2025 record. My record prediction was 10-7. It's your opportunity to give me yours record prediction right now. The bold prediction from ESPN for the Dolphins' 2025 season is that Tyreek Hill is traded over the next 2 months before the NFL trade deadline on November 4th. Seth Walder of ESPN was the person who made this prediction. So you had Marcel give the weakness, the strength, ESPN research, and then Walder comes in with the season-long prediction with Miami. And it doesn't surprise me that it is a Tyreek Hill potential trade. He said it's hardly the boldest call on the list, considering how last year ended. But if Miami's season goes south quickly, and it certainly could, it will make sense to deal Hill midway through the campaign to maximize the return as soon as possible, rather than holding on to an aging player as a non-contender in the second half. And listen, I agree with Seth. It's not a crazy thing to project. We mentioned it. The Dolphins will play 8 football games before the trade deadline on November 4th. If they are 3-5, if they are 2-6, heck, if they are 4-4, I would probably be pounding the table saying this team needs to trade Tyreek Hill, because with how much easier the schedule is in the first 8 weeks of the year in comparison to the last 10, Miami needs to be 5-3 or 6-2. Anything less than 5-3 would be a disappointment and a sign that this is not a good football team. Now, my question is this, and I've said the Dolphins could trade Tyreek if it goes poorly, but what if the Dolphins actually start the year 5-3 or 6-2? Malik Washington's dominant. Jalen Waddle's having an unbelievable wide receiver 1 year. What if it's so obvious that the Dolphins don't need Tyreek Hill to be successful and they still trade him anyway? The reason why you would do that, even if the Dolphins are playing well, is because he won't be here in 2026. He has a $52.8 million cap hit. You save $36.3 million if you cut him after the year before June 1st. He's not going to be on the roster next season. So why not trade him and recoup some assets? Now, would I want that if the Dolphins are 5-3 and 6-2? Probably not, because I would still understand, and you should as well, that Tyreek Hill, in just his presence on the football field, frees up other players like Malik Washington and Jalen Waddle due to his threat and speed down the football field. But it is an intriguing hypothetical to think of. And I'm not going to say it's crazy to say that he's not on the team playing in December. I'll just say that right now. That'll do it for today's show. As I said earlier, make sure you do subscribe. ESPN Plus charges you $120 a year. We charge you nothing. So subscribe to the channel today for daily content, and let's hit 73K before the kickoff on Sunday afternoon.